Hello, John.
Hello, Oliver.
Now, last night we were in the town hall meeting in Delvin.
That's right.
And this was a town hall meeting that was organised by a few people. You're going to mention them. And it was basically about trying to sort out what's wrong in the small town, trying to make it industrious. We're talking about the Gardaí, the CE schemes, transport, privatisation of the Gardaí, lack of industry, and you, of course, gave your say as well. So can you tell us who was there, who organised it?
A man called Patrick Murphy, whom I was speaking to, he lives just outside Delvin, and he organised it, and I meant to congratulate him for his, the idea of what he did, calling it, because it does sort of give the people in Delvin an idea of what politicians, of what they're like, and what they kind of stand for.
Okay. And one thing that came up, and we met a lady outside, was CE schemes. They're getting rid of the CE schemes, apparently. These are the community employment schemes.
That's right, and it's something to give people, especially young people and even middle-aged people, that have been thrown on the scrap heap with the closure of businesses and the closure of family businesses, etc. And it gives them that they can do certain items that improve the locality, because they do chores that help the town of Delvin, and wherever these employment schemes are given, when there's no industry worth talking about, at least there's something done to improve the quality of life in the towns, villages that's deserted.
I was talking to a man up the country, and he echoed what you've always been saying, which is that you were saying that you really need infrastructure in a small town, and you need to create industrious type groups that lead it, and proper leadership.
Correct. You need people that have some vision, and vision to sort of deal with the problems in the town. The best item, the best thing to do for Delvin, and I said it last night, the best thing is to form a development association or company. It could even be limited or whatever, form it that it has clear objectives. And one of the first things I suggested that they do, because there's so many issues in these towns that on a lot of levels there's problems. Now the first thing to do with the development association would be the castle. That's a very imposing relic of times past. That is the Lacey Castle at the top of the town. It's in a good structure, because a lot of these places are actually in ruins, but this one seems to be standing, and it could easily be a couple of rooms refurbished to have it as a visitor centre, where they might also show videos of the surrounding areas, etc., because it has a lot of attractions, Delvin and the surrounding areas.
That's right. And somebody mentioned about that there's only, I think, 2 Gardaí in the local police station, and that they were saying that there's so many Garda vans now, the speed vans we're talking about, and that's really what that really is a privatisation of the Gardaí. That's
right. That is correct, because in the town that I live in, Oldcastle, oftentimes there's a speed van just as you're going into the town from where I live, which is kind of just beside the Kells Road, and he's down there as you're going into the town. There's a 60-mile speed limit, and then suddenly goes into 50, and it's very hard sometimes to know in the short distance. So he's planked there, and once or twice he was there when people were going to mass, when people could maybe be a bit late, and they might be going that bit quicker in order to try and get before the first gospel is over, that type of thing. So that's where he's there, and that looks as if all they're interested in is catching people and getting funds, because apparently it was made clear last night at the meeting by some expert that they collected maybe 9 million or something, and then the figure was made up by the government to subsidise them to the tune of about 11 million per year. So they're not cost effective, and they are a private organisation, and they should have nothing to do with operating speed traps. That should be the function of the Gardaí, and it's another example of the sort of privatisation of essential services, as they did with the refuse lorries that's going around the country all the time and going into towns and maybe 3 or 4 of them, and holding up traffic.
That's it. There was a young lady there. She was the youngest there. She was only about 17. She was a Leaving Cert student, and she was going to a first year college in Athlone, as far as I know. And she said it's very, very difficult for her to get to Athlone. There's no proper service there from her town of Delvin, and that she said she wouldn't cycle.
Yeah, somebody said that the public transport situation is such that you could cycle there quicker, because Delvin is not too far from Mullingar, perhaps about 7 miles at the max, and then there's a good service from Mullingar because it's the county town, I think, or is it Athlone? That's a 6 marker, but in any event, Mullingar is a big town, and there's trains going to Athlone, which go on to Galway from Mullingar, but it means then that transport to Mullingar is not really, it's very scarce. They complain about that, the lack of the public transport, but there are private operators, and I think that the like of that girl, and I think I alluded to it when I spoke about it, that should be able to have a pass that would be attractive enough that it might be a free pass, but it shouldn't be inexpensive, and that somehow or other that she could be brought in some way to Athlone in a reasonable time, without this business of taking apparently a couple of hours, because that's not much good. And then if she's coming home, which in all of course events, Delvin is in County Westmeath and so is Athlone, but it's at the other end of the town, so you can be living in County Westmeath and yet be not as able to connect with others. Delvin is a little bit better than some other towns that's not near anything like a main town and have to travel much further distances, so they have some little help in Delvin by comparison with other towns and villages in the country that's very much isolated, more than even Delvin.
That's it. So one thing that came up as well was that the local people were saying that they're sick and tired of politicians talking about national issues. That no matter what they do, they want to talk about local issues, but the politicians still talk about national issues. They want local issues, local problems solved. And so what would John Malone do for Delvin and for Meath West as a TD?
A couple of things here. The first thing I'll say that they expressed an opinion that there was no TD or politician in their area, and somehow or other that they might have suffered. I think that's a bit of, I can understand their problem there, but it's not that they haven't got some kind of representation by the ones that's there, but the trouble is that they have done nothing, because they've been in power since the foundation of the state, and it has resulted in the policies that are pursued, that these towns now are deserted and they haven't got the infrastructure and the transport that they would have had years ago. There's a lot of issues affecting Delvin and other towns and villages, so you have to start somewhere. And John Malone suggested that the closure of family stores in every sector in the town. I'm talking about not just grocery shops, but drapery shops. There's a hardware shop there now, and I hope they're doing enough business to sustain their business and make a living out of it, and pay their staff a decent wage. But quite frankly, people now are persuaded, and with the advertisement that these monopolies do, and I'm talking about in the grocery trade, you have a situation where it's dominated by a lot of foreign-owned stores and a lot of other supermarkets. And I suggested that their open hours be reduced. In other words, that they had to close earlier than what they do. Sometimes they're open at 10 o'clock at night. So nobody has a chance to earn a crust, a family business or somebody like that. So they're open at all hours, 10 o'clock at night. Now they should be closed much earlier. Don't think I've mentioned that they should be closed on a Sunday, because they are in the continent not obliged to open on a Sunday. Family stores therefore have some chance. So that was one example. I mentioned also that because of the preponderance of monopolies, not just as I say with the multiples, because they also do a lot of products that affect drapery stores, electrical stores, hardware stores. Like that shouldn't be. They also have off licenses, and that shouldn't also be. The pubs have been badly affected by the monopoly situation, and they're offering drinks at very much reduced prices that publicans nearly can't buy wholesale at. So that's a situation that should be dealt with forthwith. It's not something that requires expert opinions or reports or committee studying it. It just stared you in the face. We see the decline of every sort of family business. You've got monopolies in the chemist trade. You've got boots. You've got monopolies in the meat trade for farmers. You need competition. Monopolies are about the worst thing that can ever happen in any society. But anything that should be promoted should be Irish companies, and some effort given to them so as there can be a level playing field. It's not a level playing field at the moment, and this is what they presided over, because I don't think they have any business understanding. Civil servants are divorced from the cut and thrust of business, and they don't understand it. And this Fine Gael government, above all governments, is the one that does not understand it, and previous governments didn't. I also mentioned that I dealt with companies in a very prosperous way down the years, and they were marvellous companies to deal with, and they were very much supportive of Irish companies. Now we have. I also mentioned that there should be the reintroduction of the below cost grocery order for the food for family stores, etc. That was abolished by Meath West when he was Minister for Industry and Commerce, the leader of Fianna Fáil. So that should have never happened. The advice was, do not do that because you'll destroy the family store. So this is what I said about the lack of looking after towns and villages in the way that they should. You always try to preserve a level playing field, and these are going to the same people in these deserted towns and villages, looking to continue the policies that they have continued so disastrously for these deserted towns and villages. So I think I was very emphatic about the fact that they haven't done it. So give your votes to other people that are not contaminated like that, and that have the interest, and the Renua Ireland party has that interest because it's called Renua, which means renewal of these towns and villages.
That's it.
It's a lot more, but however, that's about the basic.
Yeah, but the castle and the courthouse, I mean, they're two nice places that could have been, they had a bit of tourist potential. And I think there was some misunderstanding, wasn't there, about the castle last night. Is there two castles in Delvin?
Well, there is. There's a one near where there's a golf club, but I think that the lady, when I spoke about the castle to be, which is dominates the town, that it could be a tourist attraction just for the development company to focus on having a couple of rooms redone so as they could have an interpretive centre, and people then could, tourists and visitors could enter it and learn something about the quality of what it was like in the past. Strokestown, Kinder's Common, the castle there was owned by the Mahons, very bad landlords during the penal times and even up in the 1800s, terrible. But now there's people visit it because there's an interpretive centre in it, there's a restaurant, there's all sorts of information about it, and lovely and grounds, and it's very interesting. There's possibility with the Lacey Castle in Delvin, because there are other Lacey castles around in the Midlands and elsewhere, and there could be a sort of a like what they have in pilgrim paths, a kind of a journey to visit all these sites. There's one big one in Trim, which attracts a lot of visitors, and which has been redesigned so that you can be in rooms where these people lived years ago. And they've done the same thing in Boyle, County Roscommon. So why not Delvin?
Exactly.
It's not, apparently there's a house that backs onto it, their garden, so their privacy might be interfered with. But there's no problem in building a wall to give them the privacy, because it shouldn't interfere with such an amenity as a castle that could be a couple of rooms refurbished.
That's it.
You know.
And then the courthouse. I mean, the courthouse was
Aye,
demolished.
that was another thing. There was a courthouse there that was within a year of being a protected structure, because it was a good asset to the town to show the sort of quality of workmanship and design that occurred. One example is the church. There was nothing there to indicate how long it was established, and I found out because we got mass there on Saturday before this meeting, and apparently it's over 130 years, and it's in beautiful condition, and it's beautifully designed, and quite a large church, so there must have been a large congregation going to mass there at the time. And when I was at mass last night, there was a good crowd at it, but apparently there was people there with children about to make their confirmation next week, and they were going to get some further instruction after the mass to have 6 mass yesterday evening, Saturday evening, the vigil mass. So that is a marvellous structure as well, and it shows the quality of the design. And this is over 100 years ago when we got the Catholic emancipation, and that would have been built with the hard-earned money of the local people who weren't in possession of a great lot of money them times. They barely could survive, but they managed to put their pennies together and help to support that church.
That's it. And when you're coming into the town, Delvin, there, I seen on the left-hand side, I passed, it's a building, it's blue, but it kind of looks like a shipping container from the docks. What building is that?
Well, that's, it's marked as a handball alley, but apparently nobody plays handball in it. That's where the courthouse was, and this person that put that monstrosity there apparently got planning permission, because you can't do those things without planning permission. And so whoever granted that, and whatever period it was granted in, should be questioned, because it's a monstrosity. It does nothing for the town. There's a couple of buildings along there, and I think the local people are not a bit pleased with them, because it gives a wrong balance to the town. It hasn't got that, which it had, that kind of history, because Delvin has a long history, and I mentioned it myself last night, that it was the original trail or way for going from the hill of Tara, or from Tara where the kings were, to Connaught where the kings of Connaught were. It was a main thoroughfare, so it's going back many a time. And apparently St. Patrick, I didn't mention this of course, but because you were limited to what you could say, but St. Patrick travelled that route as well when he was bringing the Catholic faith to Ireland.
So we've had Fine Gael and we've had Fianna Fáil in power since the history
And
of this,
Labour.
and Labour since the history of the state. Well, Labour is small to a small extent.
Oh, they were big.
Were they? Were they big?
Oh, they were.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, no, they're small now because of what the sort of policies they supported, which is not good for the country.
Okay, so so they've all made a mess of it, and you can see clearly over the last 40 years, particularly, right, that rural Ireland has totally been left behind. Everything is centralised in Dublin. The money's in Dublin. There's no money down the country. What do you think people should do on Saturday when they vote?
They should vote. They should vote for other parties, the like of Renew Ireland, who will not get any publicity or anything from the media, because they're biased.
And do you think they're biased of Renua because of their pro-life stance and their?
They describe them as a right wing, and they're not such right wing. They're made up of ordinary people, ordinary working people that support the policies that they have, and their policies to address the very issues of these deserted towns and villages. They're not interested in other issues. They want to have policies that will help those people. They will support the policies that I've just outlined, to reintroduce the below-cost grocery order, to also look at other orders where there's monopolies, and to sort of have some input into particularly German discount stores that supply all sorts of products aside from the grocery, in the drapery, in the electrical, in the hardware, in the garden centre business. I mean, like that is not fair, because they have these stores all over Europe, and so they can do whatever it is, buy from God knows where. Now, Irish companies in those trades are not able to do that, so they should be limited to what, if they're a supermarket with cheap food, well then that's what they should be at. And you have the other ones, multiples, selling clothes and everything else. And so, I mean, there's no drapery stores now. I didn't mention this, but there's no drapery stores. Some fella told me, from nearly Donegal down to Meath, because they've all gone, and they were great stores. Even McGee's, the famous McGee's.
I remember McGee's.
Well, they had a factory employing hundreds of people, or a lot of people in Donegal town, and I think they've closed that, and I think they're making their shoes somewhere abroad with the label of McGee. So all this kind of business is counterproductive. We've seen the closure of the sugar factories. I mentioned that. Farmers are supplying beet for the sugar factories, so we were sufficient as regards sugar. Now we're not sufficient, and there's a certain instability in the world, and there could very well be a difficulty with shipping coming. And so what are we going to do for sugar? Because we closed the sugar factories. Fianna Fáil did that.
And of course the bacon factories are gone as well. And the jam factories, the biscuit factories, the bread factories. I mean, there's a lot of them.
Funny enough, I didn't even get around, because there's only so much. There's so much to be rectified.
Yeah.
In Boyle, that's gone down something terrible. I referred to Boyle in my talking about it, because the same thing applies to Delvin. There was 2 bakers in Boyle, Egan's and Murphy's, and they supplied bread, and they also did the surrounding areas where there was family businesses. There's more bakers gone. There's more food companies gone that you could spend an hour talking and listening to them.
Yeah.
In every sector.
One thing I was disappointed there last night was that there seemed to be no real representation of the farmers, or particularly one particular area that I'm interested in, because I've done a bit of study on it, right? And that's vegetable growing. A lot of our vegetables come from the UK. It's a video that you covered before a long time ago, and we discovered that what we actually get from the UK, from the vegetables that come from into Ireland, a lot of them come from the UK, and it's because the UK has a surplus of 10% always to feed 60 million people. So it means they're coming in at half price, the vegetables.
Well, you see, that's because of the multiples that you have. Yeah. You haven't got the sort of the family stores which supported Irish products, and farmers and others grew vegetables which supplied the local stores.
You
can't supply these multiples because they want them in a certain package. When have you had an Irish apple recently? Apples are coming from all over the world, bar this country, where they could grow easy. A lot of stuff can grow in this country, fruit and strawberries, raspberries and all the rest of it. Is there any jam manufacturers left? A lot of them is closed. Lamb Brothers, that was very popular, and Bo Peep, that was made in Drumchamber. Now, as I say, there's so much to be done. We have to start bit by bit. But there has to be vision for to deal with it.
Who were the 3 politicians that didn't show up? There was one that arrived late. He was a Fine Gael, was he?
That's right. He was a junior minister in the Fine Gael, Damien English.
He arrived late and he left earlier. And then there was 2 more.
He didn't obey the bell when it was wrong. And he spoke like kind of in an authoritative manner. But they've been presided over very divisive issues. So at the end of the day, his contribution was not uplifting.
Okay, and then there was 2 that didn't show at all. Are they both Fine Gael as well?
That's right, they're both Fine Gael. One called Sarah O'Reilly, and there's another Sarah O'Reilly which is for A2 in Baileyborough from the cabin. So it's often a bit confusing. So Sarah O'Reilly, Fine Gael, she has posters up everywhere. She didn't appear. And then a fellow called French for Fine Gael. There are 3 candidates, English, Sarah O'Reilly, and this fella French, Mr. French. So they didn't show up, and Shane Cassels of Fianna Fáil, he's the only candidate for Fianna Fáil. He didn't show up, but I think he had indicated that he wouldn't, because I met him in Delvin on Friday. I was there on Friday to sort of see for myself what way the town was, because I know Delvin for donkey's years, and the only way to know what's going on is to walk the town, which I did on Friday, and I happened to meet Shane Cassels and a person who was with him doing leaflets. So he didn't appear anyway, so they were invited, and I think everyone that was invited should have appeared.
They should have, but there was a good turnout.
There was a good turnout because, as I say, at the Mass, a lot of parents would have had to, their children had to go for some confirmation, further confirmation instruction. It never happened in my time. We were instructed in the confirmation, and we were confirmed because we were taught it. Now, the business of going after 6:30 Mass, or to God knows what time, all these ones making a confirmation, seemed kind of not good. Yeah. Considering there was a meeting, a very important meeting in the hall, and there would have been a lot more people there if that wasn't going on. So I think there's a lack of communication sometimes, even with local people, because the priest should have taken into account that there was an important meeting to sort of see what was going to be done for Delvin.
Am I right in saying that there was a lad there, and he stood up and he said that there was a factory in the town or outside the outskirts of the town, and they haven't had a wage increase in, I think he said 14 years.
13 years, yeah.
13 years.
Lucky for someone, not lucky for others. He said because there was different owners taking over. Apparently it's very successful, but it must be foreign owned. Or maybe it was Irish owned, but they sold for the King's Gillen for money. And but wherever it's, I think I know it is in Collinstown. But that's not much good. That's not much good because he did indicate there's about 400 workers there, and they haven't had a wage increase, and now half of them it's not Irish, that's from
right.
other Europe and that's a way of keeping wages down.
Yeah.
Now that wasn't discussed there because suddenly you might be called
racist or
which is rubbish
yeah,
because this country has a damn sight more percentage wise than any other country in Europe. And yet our own people had to emigrate, and they're still doing it because the wages are so low and the price of houses is so high. So as I say, there's so many issues that has to be dealt with, and this is where independent parties, the like of Renua, aim to, which is Paddy Beans, although he's going to have a hard time because Sinn Féin, he was a member of that, and they'll be after him. And but he has 20 candidates going, and I hope I've earmarked that he might get 5 seats, and they would be a great help in rectifying these because they believe in the same things that Renua Ireland believe in, and John Malone believes in.
That's it. Good luck, John, on Saturday, and I'm sure the people of Delvin will give you their vote.
Well, I try to be honest with them and not give them a load of old nonsense. It's for the government or whatever government is in, and I hope it's a coalition, and not a coalition of the like of Fianna Fáil and Sinn Féin, a coalition that involves the like of these parties that have the interests of these towns and villages that deserted at heart, and will make sure that they're looked after. The same as Tony Gregory did it for the people in
You
Dublin.
just mentioned the coalition there, so I'll have to ask you a question before you go. What would you think of a coalition? Would you have a preference, say, for 2-party coalition or a 3-party coalition? Is that too messy?
I'd have a preference for a coalition that involves a coalition with parties that have precise policies to deal with the deserted towns and villages.
Okay, so kind of a probably a granular approach. The nitty gritties is what.
Yeah, do it one by one because there's so much to be done.
Yeah.
And you can't do all at one time. Start and get the level playing field. Make sure it's a level playing field, and that's where you get the local businesses. Limit the power of the multiples. Reduce their percentage.
Yeah.
In the interest of competition.
Yeah.
Now that's very important, and limit their opening hours. Limit their opening hours. There's other stores, family stores, that sometimes work on social hours. They're trying to make a living and rear a family. they have to be supported. These politicians from these parties are going to the same people that they have deserted.
Yeah.
And they're not worth a vote. But the independent parties like Renua Ireland, Ain too, and even the Irish Freedom Party, which I didn't mention, and they must have been invited to probably have no candidates standing, but to have candidates standing in elections, and they're pro-life and pro the values that we stand for, and there might be some other independents with the same attitude.
So I think really what you're saying is, if you want change, embrace the new parties.
Correct.
Yes.
That's number one. Think outside the box.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much, Oliver.